Welcome to The Inner Sleeve, a podcast from Reconnect, exploring the stories, ideas, and cultural moments behind albums that continue to shape us. For our first episode, I'm joined by the amazing Soul Sugar Joint as we explore Lauryn Hill's The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill and MTV Unplugged 2.0, ahead of Lauryn Hill Unfiltered, the inaugural edition of Reconnect with Kef. I'm your host and founder of Reconnect, Sam. Let's get into it. Right. Soul Sugar, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Inner Sleeve. It's great to have you here to kind of dissect and talk about one of the most, if not the most important artists in R&B. But I think before we get started, it'd be great for you to tell us a little bit about yourself for those that may not be aware of the amazing talent and person that you are.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited for this conversation and like to dive into Lauryn Hill. A bit about me. I'm Brooks, and I've been the creator of the Soul Sugar Joint for about 5 years, and I connect classic and modern alternative R&B, soul, jazz, funk music, and I just love history. I love tying things together. And recently, I've had more of a interest in bringing insight into music and how our favorite artists and their work informs our lives and like helps us to work through life and accompanies us. And so that's why I really resonate with what you're doing, because I think the discussions around music helps us to also dive into ourselves more. And I've had an audience on TikTok and Instagram since 2021, December. And it just grew. My love of music turned into me DJing, and I have election takeover. I've gone across the world sharing music, and it's just been so fun. I get to have conversations like this. So that's a bit about me.
Amazing. And it's been amazing to see your growth over that period of time as well. It was my wife that actually first followed you, and then we've both been avid culture followers of your journey and your pathway ever since. So it's been amazing to kind of see that, and then to have this conversation with you. It's a bit of a surreal moment for myself. So it's been amazing.
Thank you.
I think getting straight into it, I think it'd be great to understand kind of like what's your earliest memory of Lauryn Hill and your kind of first exposure to the amazing talent that she is.
Yeah, I was thinking about this question, and I would say growing up on a lot of gospel music, I didn't have a lot of introduction to 2000s R&B unless I actively went and sought it out myself. So in high school, I remember being in art class and deciding to listen to Lauryn Hill's Miseducation of Lauryn Hill while we were working on, I think it was like a pencil drawing self-portraits.
Yeah.
And I vividly remember the skit of the intro with the teacher asking the kids like, for attendance, and then asking them about love and everything. And it just was so fun to listen to because it just felt like theater, like an audio theater. But yeah, I would say that is my earliest memory being in high school. How about yours?
Mine would be my older sister is the one that kind of built my passion for music. And so it was always a case of sneaking into her room to grab the CDs and play them without getting shouted at. We had just, I think it must have been just in and around Sister Act 2 had come out. And then that was kind of like my first exposure to Lauryn Hill. And I was like, who is this person that's got amazing vocals and this, like, just demure approach? And then the album came out, and my sister bought it, and she'd been playing it for ages. And I had just got a CD player for my birthday, and I had no CDs. And so I snuck into her room to play it, and I literally just sat with it in my dark room because I was a moody boy going through my teenage years, playing it, and just to understand like the journey and kind of really understanding how, as I was kind of growing up, a lot of the stories that she was telling kind of very much resonated with what I was going through as a geeky kid trying to navigate London at that time, despite the fact that it was based off of her pathway in New York. it was still kind of like you could literally just copy and paste it and drop it here, and it spoke to me in that way.
Yes, yes. And I feel like that's a really good takeaway from her work because, and I'm sure we're going to get into it, of course, but it's like the personal being universal, like how intricate she would get and specific in her own experience, and really just describing what it's like to be a human being and like specifically be a Black woman, but it becomes even more universal in just the plight of man. She's incredible, like a genius.
And I completely agree, and that kind of leads me straight on to the second question. Why do you think it has resonated with so many people?
Mm.
And it has resonated with people multi-generational, multi-ethnicity, multi orientation. It doesn't matter race, creed, color. Um, Everyone holds that album in such reverence. Why do you think that? What do you think that is, leading into some of those themes you were kind of teasing a second ago?
Mm. It's hard to articulate it. I mean, my best attempt at answering that question is that again, yeah, it's universal. But it's universal in how personal it is and her vulnerability of it, even if it's not even just like, a man might not ever know what it's like to be a mother or whatever, but it's still like the way that she speaks about love or care or tenderness, people can get into those principles and they can feel through her words or just like the energy of how she says things or sings things, her writing. It's so layered. So like anyone can get at it from any perspective. But I think it's almost like any good novel. You don't necessarily have to be exactly like the character to empathize with them. And I think she allowed herself to be seen. And I think the reason why we love artists is because they are so forward with their humanity. And it's scary to do that just day to day. You probably can't break down in tears in front of your office, but she did it during
Yeah,
Unplugged, So it's like there's that level of like, wow, she is an example of freedom, which was like a major theme in her art. But yeah, to go back to your question, I think it's mainly just her grasp on reality and her
yeah.
articulation of it and giving us the words that we can't say, that we couldn't come up with, or the way that she sees the world so plainly and frankly is just like so refreshing.
I completely agree, and I think part of the reason why it really resonated with me is that being as they would say, I'm an older millennial. Those that put labels on things. Um, for me, growing up in that generation where men didn't really talk about their feelings, it was a record where you could almost hear your feelings being talked back to that were swelling around in your head,
Mm,
that you were too scared to say in and amongst the boys and the lads, etc. At those particular
yeah.
times. But you almost had somebody that was almost doing that journaling exercise for you, but almost as a bit of a mirror back to you for you to kind of narrate and navigate that internally without the space of having to be able to kind of express that externally, which is where I kind of found that kind of it almost felt like a safe haven, a little warm blanket over you in terms of playing that album, which is what I really really love. I think because of the weighting and the way that it resonates, I think one of the things, and it was a conversation I was having earlier today with somebody, do you think that she was prepared for the level of impact that that album was ultimately going to have? Because I feel like it had its moment and obviously won its Grammys and got all of its plaudits. But I think the lasting impact that she had, do you think she had any semblance or any idea? And why do you think it's had such a lasting impact on the culture?
Mm. Well, I feel like that would be up to her to answer, but from what I have gotten from her interviews or just like the little bit of research that I have of this particular, way that she took in all her success, it was something that was overwhelming due to the way that everything kind of switched up around her, and also how she in Unplugged she speaks about being imprisoned by all of the things and all of what was brought to her, given to her, or she's like more stuff actually becomes a cage, and how she didn't get a lot of support from really anyone to create a sequel or a sophomore album. And that reminds me a lot of even Victoria Monet. She spoke about what it felt like to get a Grammy, how to finally, no, she won 2 Grammys, to win both categories. And the aftermath of that wasn't always positive. It's like, okay, now here's pressure and you need to live up to our expectations. And expectations is like it's like kryptonite, or it's a very weakening, imprisoning thing for an artist to have to live to anyone's expectations and not be able to express themselves freely. So from what I know about what she said about that, that seems to be like how she felt.
And do you kind of think that we potentially might have fed into that by, because I sometimes think that as a culture and as music lovers and fans, that I think sometimes we over romanticize certain albums and therefore unknowingly
Yeah.
make the expression of emotion, we've kind of pushed it back and compounded what was meant to be a bit of a release. And therefore, talking to your point about it creating a cage, we almost needed, almost as what an addict would want, like that next dopamine hit of that emotional release. But to understand that album is to understand that there was so much emotion let out of that it must have been exhausting to kind of put all of that into art. And people forget how young she
Yes.
was when she released that album as well, don't you think?
Yeah, and she was saying that there was nothing that preceded that album. That was just like where she was at the time, and that's what came out of it. This beauty of creation. I think that a lot of people can, or creatives or artists can empathize or know how it feels to just create something for fun, put it out there, and then if it's really well received, it's like, oh, it's like gratitude on top of just the love of the process. But I think, like, to your point, when people start to almost worship a piece of art, and even specifically for Lauryn Hill, she's not that kind of person where she even wants that kind of glory. Like the whole, what felt like the thesis of Unplugged was like, in Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, is that I am a human and we are all dealing with the same things. And I'm not greater than anyone, and having to remind people about, like, it's so interesting that and I even like have notes about how she blew up, and she is like everything that shouldn't have succeeded.
Yeah.
Like her being not only a Black woman, but a dark-skinned Black woman. And she's not even trying to be in Eurocentric beauty standards. She had locks. She also was speaking out against these creations or these structures of power within the music industry. She was being forthright about God. Like, all of these different things should not have made her the legend that she is. And I think she's well aware of that, and wants to dismantle in Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, in Unplugged, wishes to dismantle that that glorification of her.
I completely agree, because I think it's really important that people kind of forget the context and the time when that album came out. We were effectively in what would be, and I don't know if the term is still the same in the States, but here we would coin that as the bling era of music, where it was the shiny suits, it was a Hype Williams video, it was hyper production, hyper stylized, almost playing into certain stereotypes and tropes of what was expected. Whereas you had this person who was being truly true to themselves and giving you themes of vulnerability, of love, of exhaustion as well. People forget that
Yeah.
she was talking about how she was exhausted, having been effectively in the limelight since she was about 16, 17, all the way through.
Oof.
Um,
Yeah.
Contrasting that with all of the hype that had been going on and all of the kind of like MTV Cribs and MTV era that we were in, it I think it felt very much like a bit of a tonic to that, in that it felt like a bit of a cleanse from the fact that we were getting ultimately overstimulated, and somebody needed to come along with the pin and almost burst that bubble. And then I think in that, she got put on this pedestal of reverence that I don't think
Yeah.
any human is ever prepared for, because no one is supposed
No,
to
and it's
be
so
here.
ironic.
It's,
Yeah.
I find it in her trying her best to not be on that pedestal, and she fought it with all of her being.
Exactly. They're like spoken like a true prophet. She is the second coming.
Exactly. And so for me, it was like when she then went on that sabbatical where she embraced she wanted to just be a mother. She just wanted to be a wife. And then she came back and she kind of stripped it away in that MTV Unplugged. And I remember watching that vividly and seeing her.
Wow.
It was that moment where I realized, even I'm guilty of it. I just sat there and I was like, oh, you are a human being.
Mm.
And you're
Yeah.
not this almost godlike or goddess-like entity that we've created or that we've kind of manifested in our head. You have
For
the
sure.
same issues and the same pains and the same frustrations that we have. And you
Yeah.
just want a vehicle to be able to articulate that in a way that someone else can kind of be able to say, you know what, I'm also being heard in this moment because I'm going through something similar, or that can be something that talks to me at this moment or later on in my life. And so for me, it's kind of like what I'd be amazing to understand is what song kind of spoke to you when you first heard either the Unplugged or Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, and what now
Mm.
speaks to you now, several years further down the line from when you first heard it or heard that.
Mm. So when it comes to the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, that was high school, and I knew the hits. You know, "Doo Wop," that thing was like it's just so catchy. It's so good. She's really spitting in that and giving a lot of wisdom. And as I was like analyzing the songs in preparation for this, it to me really did feel like she was giving warnings and being more in a maternal position of telling everyone, okay, like watch out for these girls, watch out for these boys, and they
Mm-hmm.
can do these things and those things. And in a lot of ways, I think ongoing conversation, even online, is how ill prepared Black children are in dating, specifically Black women. And so, in a way, she's bringing a solution and giving insight into what to look out for. But that to me was very, I thought more about it. Also, X Factor,
Mm-hmm.
um, the insecurity that I hear in it now. Whereas I think before I was just always so, I loved how forthright she was in her vulnerability. And to me, that was confidence, that was strength. But even watching the music video helped me to see that, oh, this is like coming from a place of like, who do I have to be to get some reciprocity, and like that insecurity, that willingness to earn love in an emotionally dysfunctional relationship. And I think going through experiences of my own also informs like, oh, this is what she's talking about. You know, when you listen to something when you're a kid and when you become an adult, you're like, this hits different. So I felt that. And then with Unplugged, actually, my first time listening to the whole album, I knew Gotta Have Peace of Mind.
Yeah.
But I Gotta Find Peace of Mind rather. But I didn't listen to the entire performance until recently. And I really loved her song I Get Out and Oh Jerusalem, and just I really felt like this was an album that helped me to reconnect with even my understanding of God too, because it's a sermon. That
Yes.
whole performance is like deeply, deeply referencing the Bible, her own relationship with God, and it's also referencing her getting free. And so that's why I love I Get Out, because I think a lot of women have a reckoning in their life where they realize not going to be able to live a life that is fulfilling for me if I don't detach from cultural expectations or even familiar or relational expectations. And she just articulates it so well.
And I agree with you. And I think also the inverse is the same for men, in that as I've got older, I've started to understand that these kind of preconceived ideas of what my role should be are
Roles,
not
yeah.
are not set in stone. And in actual fact, listening to that and understanding kind of what the preconceived roles can cause ultimately in terms of damage and pain, it was a warning to me to say, you know what, have some introspection, take a moment and understand what you need to do to make sure that you are the best person, the best version of yourself for
Mm-hmm.
your life partner, not just what society thinks you should be doing. Man, go get job, man, go get berries, food, and feed family.
Real, real.
Throw that completely away, because it does more harm than ultimately it does good. I think, particularly with MTV Unplugged 2.0, I remember the narrative around it being quite decisive. Some calling it a bit of a breakdown, some calling it a spiritual reckoning. Um,
Mm.
I'm in the camp that it was a human being as vulnerable as they can be, and which would normally be in the. I'll take a step back. When I was at university, one of the things that I did was a paper on the person that we are. There is the person that we
Mm.
construct a stage for when we step outside of our front door, and that's the expectations that the world expects to see. But there is also the self of us that's behind the stage, that's doing the rigging, that's doing the lighting, that's doing the sound checks. That that
Mm.
and keeping that person edified, fed, watered allows you to keep to do the performance element. And for me, that felt like that person, when I watched it and when I listened to it, the backstage person of Lauryn Hill had run her race. She was exhausted. She was calling for a timeout. And therefore, her onstage presence couldn't be this expectation that we'd all built up to be. And that's kind of like
Yeah.
the biggest life lesson I kind of took from it. Was there anything of that kind of ilk that you kind of took from it, or even in a recent kind of listening back?
Yeah, and also I just love what you just said. I mean, I think that is so true and insightful to look at it as a stage in a performance. And if you're being an actor, and also it's like, why am I up here performing for y'all? And that's another thing that she even brought up in the in Unplugged. I'm looking down at my notes and everything. I was like, because you said stage, and that just reminded me specifically of something that she did say in it, and I think I wrote it down, but I likely won't be able to find it. But her being like, I would dress up for y'all, but I don't have it in me. And she's like, I used to just focus so much on myself and be like, oh, I can't spend time with my kids because I have to drink tea and be locked away. I'm on tour. And she's like, I'm not going to do that. And when she said that when she focuses the least on herself, she's able to be used more. And it's just so freeing also to hear a woman say that, listening to her, because I in a lot of ways relate to that in being a content creator, in being a DJ, in having a career where I'm showing up. And I've also gotten to a point where I'm like, I'm not performing anymore either. Like when I make my videos, I'm not turning anything on. When I'm DJing, I'm not turning anything on. Like whatever comes through as expressive is because it's genuinely welled up within me. And it's just so nice to have that affirmed in someone that I respect so much as an artist. Like Lauryn Hill being like, I don't need an entourage. I don't need a crew. That doesn't validate me. I just like, yes, she gets it. She really does. And all of her success is through talent, is through the divine timing, the support that she's had, everything that, and even she talked about how someone will look at Bob Marley, they're like, okay, let me get locks, let me dress like him. And she's like, but what actually made him Bob Marley was everything that he went through that created that content. It's not going to be the aesthetic that we put on that would make us something. Everything has to be from the inside out. And it's just listening to her interlude. I think that was interlude 5, which I'll be listening to over and over again after this. But she was spitting so crazy to the point where I was just like, these are the kind of conversations that now I need to have and want to be privy to and have in my headphones, because it's so, like she said, get free. Like the freedom of allowing yourself to be as is, and to allow yourself to be the standard, as she said.
Yeah.
She's like, everyone are their own standard. It's just so empowering. I just loved her thoughts on that.
I completely agree. I think there is, going back to kind of what the theme we were talking about earlier, I think there is a lot of love for Lauryn Hill, the icon, and the iconography of what Lauryn Hill stood for. And a lot of that, I think, was people imprinting their thoughts and views of who she is trying to be or wanting to be, versus actually taking in who is Miss Lauryn Hill and what's the message that she's ultimately trying to convey. Because if you take that in, then you better understand it, as opposed to trying to imprint and almost molding her into who you think she should be and how she should present. And rejecting that, I think, for me, was such a bold move in an era of hyper stylized, stylistically. Everything was hyper, overstimulation left, right, and center. And to be able to kind of calm that down and go, you know what? I'm going to give you me in a jean suit, my guitar, my silk scarf, and a cap, and that's what you're going to get. And you're going to get a raw set of emotion, because ultimately, I have had to put on Miss Lauryn Hill, the mother, Miss Lauryn Hill, the wife today, Miss Lauryn Hill, the artist and business owner. And now, at the end of the day, I now have to also come and perform. You're not going to get this MTV version of me, that even despite the fact that I'm on MTV, you're going to get who I am, because this is what I have ultimately left. And everyone kind of being comfortable and understanding that what you have at times is enough, and that you need to, the way that I closed my thesis in university was that the gap between your on stage and your backstage becomes, if it becomes too big, it becomes completely and utterly unsustainable, and then ultimately it ends up in burnout. And how you close that gap so that ultimately there is little to no difference between it is the way that you can kind of operate. And the way that I kind of internalized that was that, having listened to that album, I fell into the trap, having left university, and the analogy I always use is, I was Carlton Banks at work and Will Smith outside of my 9 to 5. And in reality, knowing that I am a mixture of the two, and actually not having these two, trying to keep these two separate personas going, and ultimately detrimenting me physically and mentally, is the way forward. And I think that's what I really took away from her Unplugged session, that she had run her race trying to keep those two kind of flames burning, and ultimately needed to merge them for her own well-being, and to be available as she wanted to be on her terms to everybody in her life, including her fans.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I'm snapping right now. Yes. And it even reminds me of like The Wiz, when Richard Pryor got exposed from behind that big mask. Like, so this is you the whole time, and he couldn't even get himself home. He's like, yeah, like, y'all help me. And they're like, we came to you for help, And I think that also, that's another thing. If we're using the audience to get something from them, and she was in such a place of service in that Unplugged session, the Unplugged 2.0, it's like, she didn't go to them being like, come to me for wisdom, or I come to you for validation. She knew that she was there in service. And also, I was reminded of Grace Jones. She spoke about being, how now, it was like a quote from a book, maybe it was her autobiography or something. But she was saying that when she was outrageous, she was really like countercultural. being herself, and it was so shocking and just wild to the average person that it was a phenomenon. Whereas now she's saying, like, if someone did what I did back then today, that's them conforming. And I
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah.
yo, that
Yeah.
is deep. So when we're thinking about Lauryn Hill and how she was countercultural in a moment where everything was all hyped and blinged out, and she didn't want anything to do with that, it wasn't even, I don't think she was being performative or being, as some people say, like a pick me of like, oh, I don't wear makeup. Oh, I don't, da da da. Da. I'm not like other girls. It wasn't like that. It was, this is true, vulnerably me. There was no difference from her in front of that audience than what I could imagine her being at her kitchen table or being like at a jam session or figuring out things with her friends trying to create a song. And that level of like, there's no difference between who I am in my creation process and what I am presenting to you right now. That is probably so empowering as an artist. And it even reminded me of she brought up being reintroductions, but there was something else. I'm sure I'll remember later, but please. I could keep going.
No, but I think it kind of talks to the fact that, and kind of like taking a step back from those albums, in that when we have the opportunity to listen properly to like bodies of work, what we're able to take away from it, from a similar, like I think of music almost as impactful as learning from a textbook ready for your
For
exam.
sure.
That there are so many life lessons in there that if you just take your time to sit with music and hear the story arc, hear the timeline of what's being articulated to you, it's so much more powerful. And I think in this age of AI, algorithms, etc., I understand why there's a rejection of that to return back to that. Why do you think that now, at this point, like sitting with music has become so powerful? Because we've been talking for 30 minutes about 2 albums. I've had conversations about 20 tracks with my friends from multiple artists in that time.
True. Man, your question, my bad. Could you repeat the question?
Why do you think listening culture now is seeing that kind of resurgence in today's world?
Right. I think it's a response to overconsumption. I think it's a response to there being too much, so much, all at once, and you need to react as soon as it drops. It's just like unsustainable, and it has made the music making, it has completely desecrated it, in my opinion. It has defamed it, and it's not sacred anymore. When I think about major artists who have dropped albums with 40 some odd songs in one drop, 3 different albums at once, all the shade I'm giving right now. But I just, that to me, I was disgusted by it. And I don't even speak too much about what I don't like to see. I love to focus on the positive, but I think that in standing up for standards and in standing up for actually having cohesive bodies of work and a message and things to say, that's just too much. It's too much. And what I even see in these listening communities is a desire to go back to classics, to go back to even the 60s. You know, some people might be going back to the 20s or the 50s or whatever, but I do see more so of like 70s, 80s albums or 2000s albums. And it's just because there's a level of and not to say that there aren't artists now who are still carrying the mantle and understand the responsibility of being an artist and want to do it with respect and reverence. But the classics that we keep going back to are classics for a reason, and how they stand the test of time through the vulnerability and the weight that they use music as a tool, as a beacon, and that I think is lost in how we're always so distracted by everything and are listening. Like, I loved preparing for this because I was like, great, I get to be undistracted for however long these albums run, and I'm going to read the lyrics while I'm listening to it and journal about each song. And it allowed me to get it was like studying, like you
Yeah.
said, it's a textbook. And in things that I've been struggling with in my personal life, I had a mirror, I had someone to put the words to it. And it's a gift, but you have to be open to receive it. And now it's just like a song here, a song there. Beyonce talked about that. She's like, nobody wants to make albums anymore. It's just a bunch of singles. So yeah.
It is my big frustration because for me, the one thing that has always been an important part of like my growing up and my journey has been I couldn't wait to get paid, go to a HMV or a Virgin Records on the weekend, browse the nature,
Oh,
just the patience of just browsing through,
real.
selecting what I wanted to listen to, and it wasn't a case of get home, listen to it, and immediately call somebody to talk about it. I'm taking it in across that entire weekend. I'm sitting there studying the sleeve, studying the lyrics, understanding who's on the production, because I want to know, is this somebody new? Is it somebody that I've already heard? And is there a red thread that connects the production here to the production over there, for
Yeah.
example? Just those little nuances. And then I felt like I could then be in a place to comment, as opposed to today. The instant reaction is the first thing, because that said artist that released 3 albums, I saw the release, I jumped on some of the platforms, and there was it's amazing. Go back a week. Has anyone played it again?
Right.
Have you played it again?
Replay value. Exactly.
Like, if you cannot return to it, I don't understand. I can't understand it. For like, there are films, there are books, and there are music that you will always return to at certain times because they drew out that kind of emotion and that kind of moment for you. And I think, and also that wanting to be vulnerable, even to just yourself, because at times you need a vehicle for you to unlock that vulnerability in yourself
Yeah.
and to understand whether you had that layer or whatever that internal battle ultimately might be. I think what's interesting now is that people are now are willing to do that kind of listing environment within communities. Why do you think that kind of collective listing has now all of a sudden grown?
The lack of human connection that we get. We're constantly in each other's faces, accessing each other, but it's not the intimate connection of a shared telepathic thoughts,
Yeah.
the way you can look at someone and know what they're thinking or bust out laughing. You don't really get that through a screen. And I think people feeling lonelier than ever, music is such a great vehicle, or art in general is a great vehicle for someone to bond with someone else that they never had like full conversations with. Us as an example, like, we're bonding over these albums and we're able to talk about have like a real mentally stimulating conversation that sometimes it's hard to get to vulnerable concepts of feeling like you're in roles or feeling like there's cultural expectations on you and what that looks like off of just, hello, how's the weather? And then you can't like sometimes jump into that. So music is such a gift in that way. And people want to belong. It's a key need that we all have. It's a great vehicle for it.
I completely agree. I think, and I know people kind of laugh at it, that I know that there's been like that meme of like when guys get together, they don't ever interact and ask questions. And so when they go back to their respective partners, when they're asked questions, there are no answers because nobody had that time to ask those questions. I actually think you can explode that into modern day society. I don't think it's just a guy's trip away. I think that is
Yeah,
where
nah.
society has kind of got to today, and that no one's taken the care to understand. I'm sure I have. I have a nickname. A lot of my friends call me the shortened version of my surname, which is Bonds. And
Mhm.
we've been to weddings, and me and my wife have been to weddings, and friends of mine that have known me for over a decade have been talking to my wife, and my wife has gone, "Have you seen Sam?" And they turn to my wife and go, "Who? Have you seen Sam?" My husband. "Who?" "Once." "Oh yeah, he's over there." Because they've only ever got so far, despite that level of time that we've known each other. That connection
Wow.
has never got that deep. And I think finding that common ground on things that are really deeply meaningful, that you are willing to be vulnerable in front of other people, is so much more powerful than a double tap on a social media platform
Yeah.
or a comment here. Looking in somebody's eyes, and it's kind of like one of the things that I always say at the start of our listening rooms is that no matter where you're coming from, what you've had, a bad day or a good day, whether you've come by yourself or whether you've come with other people, you know that the people in this room all have a deep commonality and love for this artist, these artists, the songs that this person has been involved in. And that is better than any Tinder date, Hinge date, Bumble date that you could ever go on, because you've already established such a core commonality. Because music is such a cool feeling, I believe, to everybody, that that is you're miles ahead in the race in terms of a starting point and building new friendships, new connections. And that for me is the thing that I think we all need to return to, um,
Mhm.
in this overused phrase, "new world post COVID," of kind of like connecting back together through something that t- pulls at our heartstrings and pulls at our soul first and foremost. Because when the heart and the soul is warm, then as as Lauryn Hill said in MTV Unplugged, you're open to receive, and to receive that
Mhm.
friendship, and to receive that love, and that companionship that every human being is ultimately. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And music, even like who you listen to, is indication of values. So bonding over a certain artist and maybe going to a concert of a particular artist or whatnot. Like everyone knows like certain kinds of artists have certain kinds of fans.
Mm-hmm.
And you can it's even funny sometimes thinking about it, but it's so true that music can be an indication of what you are interested in, what you think about often, where you are in life, and you can definitely meet like-minded people in those rooms.
100%. I completely agree. I think it's needed more so now than ever, given the climate in both of our respective countries, and
For real.
what's going on, trying to find things that ultimately unify us and bring us together. Because the reality is that there is more that bonds us together than anything else. And if music can be the start or the genesis of kind of bringing that healing about, then I am all for it, because I think it's very much needed.
Absolutely. I agree.
Thank you. Um, that is all from me. I'd love to thank you
Huh?
so much for being part of this conversation. It's been absolutely amazing. It's like I've made a musical best friend, and I didn't even know it before.
I know. I'm like, oh, it's
I know,
oh.
I know. I this isn't the last time that we will talk. This isn't the last time that hopefully we will be
Yes.
able to chew the fat over some albums. We've got some amazing pairings coming up in the listening room that I really want you to be part of, and discuss. And let's kind of get into the nitty gritty of it, and even do some like lyrics analysis. I want to get into that kind of
Yeah.
into that deep level of conversation. That might be when it's not 105 degrees or 40 odd degrees Celsius over here, and my little fan is struggling in the corner. But but it's been amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. This was so fun and such a gift. Very timely listen of both of these albums for me. And it just, yeah, this was such a fun conversation to dive into how art is a great vehicle for talking about just life in general. So I had a lot of fun. Thank you again.
Oh, thank you so much.